Today's episode is brought to you by Bandai Spirits. Here's everything you missed in the WandaVision finale. Folks, we made it. We made it, WandaVision fans. After 8 weeks and 9 amazing episodes, our time in Westview has come to a close in the final episode aptly titled The Series Finale. This action-packed 9th episode served as a fitting capstone for Wanda and Vision's story of grief, trauma, and trying to find hope in a cruel world. It delivered on the promise of hard-hitting fight scenes, answered some burning questions, and left us wondering what's coming next with not 1, but 2 extra scenes during the credits. That's right, 2. If you missed them, pause this video, go watch them right now, then come on back. I'll wait. Alright, we're going to be processing the ramifications of this episode for months to come, but we do have plenty to talk about in the meantime, including all manner of Easter eggs, comic book references, and implications for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as always, if you prefer to read all about it, Rosie Knight has you covered over on Nerdist.com. As a reminder, to talk about this episode in detail, we do kind of have to spoil it, so if you haven't watched WandaVision Episode 9 yet, this is your last chance to make like Jimmy Woo and escape.
Flourish.
Alright, one last time. Let's get into it, shall we? This episode begins exactly where we left off in Episode 8 with Wanda facing off against Agatha Harkness, who has Wanda's kids, Billy and Tommy, held hostage in the middle of the street. And as we speculated previously, Agatha's goal here is to bait Wanda into using her powers against her so that Agatha can become the yo-magic shark that she always has been and absorb Wanda's chaos magic. I take power from the undeserving, Agatha says, and she gives Wanda an acute case of Dumbledore hand, draining her life force like she did to that coven of witches, including her own mom back in 1693. Agatha keeps trying to make Wanda an offer that she can't refuse. In exchange for surrendering her magic, Agatha will let Wanda keep her pathetic corner of the world in Westview, which, pretty rude, but, she's a pretty rude lady. This goes about as well as you might expect. Wanda pulls out one of her favorite tricks from Civil War by launching a car into a distracted Agatha, sending her hurtling into Dottie and Phil's house. We get a nice visual nod here to the Wizard of Oz with Agatha's boots beneath the car, evoking the Wicked Witch of the East being crushed by Dorothy's house, and it's extra fitting because last week we learned that Agatha's mother was named Evanora, the canonical name of the Wicked Witch of the East, so nice bit of parallel there. I guess it runs in the family. With Agatha temporarily out of the picture, Wanda sees an unexpected visitor reflected in the glass, the White Vision, the end result of S.W.O.R.D's secret project Cataract that Hayward activated during the Episode 8 post-credit scene. And this is fitting because he is merely a reflection of the Vision she knows, a pale imitation that tries to convince Wanda he's the real deal before trying to burst her head like an overripe melon. Fortunately, Wanda's Vision that she created with her chaos magic comes to her rescue, and we get that hot Vision-on-Vision action that we were promised. While the two Visions battle it out high above Westview and Wanda flies off after Agatha, we see Monica Rambeau is being held captive by Pietro Maximoff in his weird attic man cave, which is very similar in vibe to his basement room from Days of Future Past. This is where he watches Steven Seagal movies, drinks green smoothies straight from the blender, and plays guitar poorly. Although he seemingly still has super speed and super strength, we learn this is a ruse enabled by Agatha because, folks, at long last, we know the truth about Pietro thanks to a conveniently placed electric bill. Turns out, Pietro isn't Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men movies, he isn't Mephisto, he isn't the Elder God Chthon, rather, as we mentioned in our finale prediction video, Pietro is actually Ralph.
Ralph, my husband, Ralph.
Turns out Chekhov's husband isn't actually Agatha's husband at all. He's an actor who lives in Westview named, wait for it, Ralph Boner, a character I am very relieved to say is an MCU original.
Ralph, my husband,
Ralph Boner?
Which is fitting because making us think we might be getting the X-Men introduced in WandaVision was kind of a move. That said, his name, Boner, may be one last sitcom reference to Boner from Growing Pains, the annoying sidekick friend who dresses and acts pretty similarly to Ralph Boner in this episode.
Boner.
Monica's newfound spectrum powers let her perceive that Agatha has been controlling Ralph via the beaded necklace that he wears, which is the source of his so-called superpowers. And once Monica takes it off, Boner becomes a total wiener. After that, we finally get to see Paul Bettany act opposite the cameo we've all been waiting for, the actor he has longed to work with his entire life, himself. Yes, folks, it turns out Paul Bettany was trolling everyone, ourselves included, but it was worth it because we get to see what happens when two people pick the same fighting game character inside the MCU. Now, the two synthezoids have an epic, density-defying mid-air battle before Wanda's Vision briefly forces White Vision to do his best Yamcha impression by cratering his murderous mechanized butt into the ground. Meanwhile, outside the Hex, SWORD is monitoring their battle feverishly, which is fascinating because both Visions are actually giving off vibranium signatures in case there was any question as to how real the Hex Vision was in the context of Westview. Apparently he's real enough to give off the signature of decaying vibranium, so maybe there's no plot hole there after all. Here, Hayward becomes almost cartoonishly evil, taunting a handcuffed Jimmy Woo like he's a James Bond villain explaining his evil plan. Hayward says that because Wanda canceled her show, there's no footage proving there was more than one Vision, and by taking down Wanda Maximoff, that'll not only be a feather in his cap, but let him keep his sentient weapon as well. I mean, this doofus even caps it off with a pun for good measure, like, what are you doing, dude?
If only you had a little more vision.
That's a good one, Hayward.
And for his next trick, everyone's favorite magic user in the MCU, Jimmy Woo, tries to convince Hayward his FBI pals are already on their way, but thankfully his close-up magic skills and sleight of hand are more convincing because he nicks a cell phone and picks the lock on his handcuffs. Because he's an ardent fan of WandaVision, Jimmy also remarks flourish like his favorite magician the Vision did way back in episode 2.
Flourish! Flourish.
Jimmy manages to get through to a Cliff at the FBI, and although there are a couple characters in the comics named Cliff, like Cliff Randall or Cliff Garner, they're so minor it's likely they just picked a name at random for the series, so until proven otherwise, Jimmy is officially speaking to Agent Cliff Hanger. After this, though, Wanda follows Agatha to the center of town, where most of the Westview townspeople have gathered, including Herb, Norm, Dottie, Dennis the mailman, and others that we've met previously. Unfortunately for Wanda, she hasn't seen as many Star Wars movies as Agatha has, because here, Agatha absolutely has the high ground. Agatha stands in front of a billboard for a cleaning product boasting an all-natural formula using the power of Mother Earth, which is just a delightful juxtaposition with Agatha using the distinctly unnatural magic from the Book of the Damned and using power drawn in from the multiverse. And quick note, as we explained in yesterday's Chaos Magic video, whenever a spellcaster uses magic in the MCU, they draw on energy from the multiverse, at least according to the Ancient One. The far bigger revelation is that the sinister spellbook in Agatha's basement was the Darkhold all along. It's the evil spellbook that previously appeared on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Runaways. And in the comics, it was created by the Elder God Chthon as a way to bind himself to Earth from the dimension in which he dwells. Also known as the Book of the Damned, the Darkhold is almost certainly that forbidden book that was missing from the Kamar-Taj library back in Doctor Strange. And by the way, the Darkhold is also responsible for creating the first vampires in the Marvel Universe, so don't be surprised if this winds up playing a role in Blade somewhere down the line as well. According to Agatha, there's an entire chapter devoted to Wanda and the Scarlet Witch in the Darkhold, which is bad news bears if you're written about in the Book of the Damned. It claims the Scarlet Witch is not born, she's forged, and she has no need for a coven or incantation, which explains why Wanda can cast so many powerful spells without Agatha's formal training. The scorched pages of the Darkhold feature an illustration of Wanda's comic book costume, the one she saw in her vision, and has these weird snaky chthonic tendrils coming from her head like a Medusa, as well as what looks like a chart of the multiverse on the opposite page with these different circles and charts and markings all overlapping one another. But perhaps most important of all is that Wanda's power evidently exceeds that of the Sorcerer Supreme, and it's her destiny to destroy the world, which means that old Doctor Strange is gonna have his work cut out for him in the Multiverse of Madness. That dude, he's gonna be working overtime. Agatha calls Wanda's bluff about not being a villain by slowly waking the Westview townspeople from their slumber, and despite Dottie being conspicuously omitted from S.W.O.R.D's identification board during episode 4, she is not the multiversal magic user Arcana as we once speculated. Rather, she's just a mom named Sarah who's desperate to see her kid again. It's heartbreaking because Wanda is having trouble coming to terms with exactly how she's affected all of these people, who Agatha rightly terms her meat puppets. While this is happening, we see that though the White Vision doesn't have the Mind Stone in his forehead, he can still unleash a powerful blue beam of energy, and as they fly by, we see the twins hiding in their room until Billy has a series of telepathic visions of his mom in danger, much like he experienced for his dad during episode 6. Back in the town square, the townsfolk air their grievances with Wanda. Norm reveals that when Wanda lets them sleep, they have her nightmares, while Wanda argues that she's keeping them safe and peaceful. It's kind of a similar argument to what we saw in the House of M comics, where they want to give everyone exactly what they want, but it turns out to be not that at all. Unable to bear it any longer, though, Wanda unleashes a primal scream, bursting with chaos magic energy and placing a bright red collar around every person in town. Thankfully, she stops before anybody dies, but Mrs. Hart cuts to the core by saying if Wanda won't let them go, just let them all die instead. Agatha baits Wanda by asking what's stopping you from letting them go, and saying heroes don't torture people. Wanda takes the bait, channeling massive amounts of chaos magic to lift parts of the Hex barrier, which in turn causes downtown to rapidly flick through different time periods that we've seen previously. The theater marquee flits between a pair of 1960s Disney films, Big Red and Kidnapped, which is a fitting description of what Wanda did to Westview, 2013's Oz the Great and Powerful, which is all about a charlatan pretending to be an all-powerful wizard, and is directed by Sam Raimi, who will next see directing Wanda Maximoff Elizabeth Olsen in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And we also see Tannhauser Gate, a reference to another misunderstood synthetic human, Roy Batty, in his Tears in the Rain speech in Blade Runner. We see a billboard rapidly change from Westview Dairy, Wanda's milk of choice, to Hydra Soak, the bubble bath mix from Episode 3's commercial that references Wanda's deep-seated trauma from her time as Hydra's guinea pig, as well as maybe this mind-controlling soap from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. While the citizens flee, SWORD agents flood into town, and Wanda is faced with a brutal realization because by releasing the Hex, both Vision and her children, who have all converged on downtown, are fading away. They're being ripped apart because they are creations of the Hex, and the way pieces of them fly off into the ether is a direct homage to Joe Quesada's iconic House of M #1 cover. Wanda, though, has a choice: save Westview or save her family, and Wanda chooses her family, closing the barrier of the Hex once more, right as Jimmy Woo's FBI pals arrive. Agatha unleashes an unintelligible Latin assault on the Maximoff family, but Wanda shields them, which unfortunately leaves her with yet another desiccated Black Dumbledore hand. What follows is a three-way battle with Wanda fighting Agatha, Vision fighting Vision, and the kids fighting SWORD. Inside the library, we see a poster on the wall featuring a bee and a whole mess of hexagons, which leaves us only one conclusion: Wanda turned that damn SWORD agent from a beekeeper into a bee poster, which I know, sad, but true. I know, one final bonkers prediction for the road. More importantly, this scene between the Pauls Bettany isn't the knockdown, drag-out slobber knocker we might have expected. Rather, it subverts that trope like Doctor Strange did when he fought Dormammu and trapped him in a time loop. This is a battle of the galaxy brains, as Wanda's Vision forces White Vision to consider the Ship of Theseus thought experiment, which essentially asks, if all the parts of an object are replaced over time, is it still the same object? White Vision concludes that neither of them and both of them are the true Vision at the same time. But Wanda's Vision takes it a step further, restoring White Vision's repressed memories from deep within inside his synthezoid framework. We see flashes of Iron Man, Wanda, Hulk, Avengers Tower, War Machine, Vision's birth in Age of Ultron, wielding Mjolnir during the Battle of Sokovia, fighting Ultron and his drones, Wanda destroying the Mind Stone during Infinity War to prevent Thanos from getting his hands on it, their tender moments together in Infinity War, both of Vision's deaths. It's a lot to process, and the blue arc reactor on White Vision's forehead briefly turns a familiar golden yellow before a modicum of humanity is restored to this spectral synthezoid and his eyes change. White Vision only has 3 words before he pieces out: I am Vision, and then he seems to go on a Vision quest, I guess, which, get it? It kind of makes sense. Vision quest, like the West Coast Avengers storyline he's on. Anyway, while the White Vision has his memories and knowledge of his past with Wanda and the Avengers, it seems that this version of the Vision still has a long ways to go in terms of the warmth, expressiveness, and empathy of his Hex-based counterpart. While this is happening, Billy mind controls all of the SWORD agents to freeze them in place, and Tommy uses his super speed to disarm them, and he even grabs a hat a la Quicksilver in Days of Future Past. Hayward, though, being the stand-up guy that he is, takes matters into his own hands and tries to shoot the kids, but thankfully Monica Rambeau arrives in the nick of time. Her eyes glow yellow as her newfound superpowers let her turn her body into pure energy, perhaps into pure light, so she can slow the bullets to a snail's pace, and Billy's telekinesis halts the one that gets past her. That ham clown Hayward tries to hightail it on out of there, but he is stopped, thankfully, by Darcy Ex Machina. Darcy Lewis T-bones him in the giant funnel cake truck that she and Vision stole from the circus in Episode 7. And although she only gets one line, Kat Dennings makes the most of it and reminds us why she's one of the MVPs of this show.
Have fun in prison!
Seriously, folks, if we don't get an Agents of Atlas series with Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy, it's going to be a violation of the Sokovia Accords. I think. Next up, Wanda revisits yet another classic tool in her arsenal: mind control-induced nightmares like we saw in Age of Ultron. Wanda takes Agatha back to 1693 Salem, where she's about to be burned at the stake, and all the witches Agatha murdered come back to life as these zombified husks. But Agatha flips the script and the undead witches turn on Wanda instead. Agatha tells her power isn't your problem, it's knowledge. Unable to repress her true nature any longer, a headpiece of glowing red chaos energy manifests on Wanda's head and it echoes her classic comic book costume. Agatha once again promises to let Wanda and her family live in peace in Westview, correcting the flaws in her original spell if she'd only just give over all of her magic power. The two have a giant witchy battle high above Westview as Wanda pelts Agatha with magic blasts and seemingly misses other blasts hitting the walls of the Hex instead. Which, guess what? There's a good reason for that. Wanda, looking like me after a night of drinking or a year plus in quarantine, seems completely drained by Agatha, who reveals that she was lying the whole time about their deal because she omitted yet another rule of magic. Once cast, a spell can never be changed. Fortunately though, Wanda is playing the long game because those missed Chaos Blasts were designed to place strategic runes on the walls of the Hex, thereby preventing Agatha from casting any spells much like she did to Wanda in her basement in episode 8.
How do you not know the fundamentals?
So it may have been Agatha all along, but now it's Agatha not for long because Wanda absorbs all of her magic energy back and transforms into the vision of the Scarlet Witch that she saw in the Mind Stone during episode 8, complete with a seriously awesome new costume. The prophecy fulfilled, Agatha warns that Wanda doesn't know what she's done. And considering the Darkhold proclaims that the Scarlet Witch will bring about the end of the world, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that's the bad news bears to which Agatha is referring here. But what does that end of the world actually entail? Well, we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, Wanda decides to punish Agatha in the most brutal way possible, especially for someone like her, by trapping Agatha in Westview as Agnes, the nosy neighbor, forevermore. And Agatha tries to weasel out of it, saying that she's gonna need her, she doesn't know when she's unleashed, but Wanda is done listening to anything but Catherine Hahn as the kooky neighbor. So while this is the end of Agatha Harkness for now, she isn't dead, and she could even potentially be redeemed or reused at some point down the line.
I'll be seeing you, Agnes.
Not if I see you first, hon.
And here's where the episode takes a turn for the profoundly tragic, or maybe I should say the profoundly bittersweet, because this is a series all about grief, coping with loss, how we move on in the face of immeasurable sadness. And as the Hex slowly recedes and the world returns to reality, Wanda, Vision, and the kids walk back to their home for one last good night together. Now, there are a couple of small details in the boys' room, like the lamp, which was driving me crazy, but I'm fairly certain it's a modified version of the Adventure Force Astrobot walking robot toy, and there's also a poster reading Force, which, unlikely though it may seem, could be a subtle nod to ForceWorks, an Avengers superhero team that Wanda joined after the West Coast Avengers disbanded. Although the kids don't know it, their parents are saying goodbye to them here, and there's one line in particular that stands out, especially in light of the second post-credit scene. Wanda says, "You know, a family is forever. We could never truly leave each other even if we tried." Now remember that because we're going to come back to it in just a little bit. Downstairs, Wanda and Vision say their final goodbyes to one another, and Wanda reveals that Vision is the piece of the Mind Stone that lives in her. He's a creation of wires, blood, and bone from Wanda's chaos magic, but mostly, he's her love. Vision also remembers all of his past lives. As Iron Man's AI Jarvis, he was a voice with no body. As the Vision, he was a body but not human. And in the Hex, he's a memory made real. The two share a final kiss, and Vision sheds a tear, a touching homage to one of the most iconic images in Marvel Comics history from Avengers number 58 story, Even an Android Can Cry. Vision slowly dissolves in Wanda's hands, marking the third time we've seen this man perish on screen, giving Uncle Ben and Bruce and Martha Wayne a serious run for their money, except this particular death might take the cake in terms of the single most tragic and the most profoundly affecting one we've seen so far, thanks to the heart-wrenching journey we took with Wanda, Vision, and their family. Thankfully though, based on the language they use here, I imagine we'll say hello again to the Vision somewhere down the line. You know, that old classic comic book trope, which actually makes me feel good for a change. And just like that, Wanda is back on the empty plot of land where they were going to build a life together. In classic Avengers fashion, she puts a hood up in order to disguise herself, which is stealth mode. Heading to the center of town, Wanda ignores all the townspeople who are rightfully pretty angry with her, and has a nice moment with Monica, who's honest about the fact that if she had Wanda's power, she'd probably do the same thing. Wanda, changing into her sweet new costume, flies out of Westview on a quest of her own to understand her powers and what exactly it means to be the Scarlet Witch. It's fitting, though, that her last view of Westview is literally a west view as the sun sets on her perfect little life. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about those post-credit scenes, folks, because in the first one, we see Jimmy Woo running the show as the FBI begin debriefing people and cleaning up Westview. We learn that Darcy has apparently left town because debriefs are for the week, but if she doesn't show up again somewhere, I'm gonna have to personally fight Kevin Feige, and that is a promise. Anyway, Hayward is going to jail, so at least there's some justice in this godforsaken world. Meanwhile, Monica gets called into the theater by a mysterious agent who, dun dun dun, turns out to be a Skrull sent by a friend of Monica's mom that wants to meet with Monica in outer space. And in case you're wondering, that friend on a space station is Nick Fury on the Sword orbital base or spaceship that we saw him chillaxing on at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, this could theoretically lead us directly into the events of Captain Marvel 2, where we explore the weirdness between Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau. It could also set up Secret Invasion, establishing that there are still plenty of Skrulls undercover on planet Earth, and not too many people know about it. Besides, in Secret Invasion, Nick Fury is probably going to need some superpowered allies to help him fight against these shape-shifting Skrulls that are going to be wreaking havoc on our planet during that series, and Monica Rambeau sounds like exactly the right person for the job. Last but not least, we see where Wanda is studying abroad, presumably at the base of Mount Wundagore, a mountain located in the fictional Eastern European country of Transia that has major significance to Scarlet Witch in the comics. And not only is it where Wanda and Pietro were born and raised, but it's where Chthon wrote the Darkhold in a chamber deep inside that mountain. This scene is also evocative of the ending of 2008's Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton, where the Hulk retires at the end of that movie to a cabin in the woods. The way the camera moves here indicates that something is amiss, and as Lindsay Romaine points out in her piece on Nerdist.com, this pays subtle homage to The Shining. We see an impossible window like in Ullman's office, and the designs on the windows themselves echo those of the Overlook Hotel. And side note, while the design on the shutters on the cabin are likely decorative, it also kinda looks similar to the runes that Wanda used inside the Hex, so maybe they are a subtle magical ward against intruders. And while Wanda's physical form is making tea and enjoying the crisp mountain air, Wanda is astrally projecting her spirit like Doctor Strange did so she can learn magic from forbidden books, in this case, the Darkhold. Clad in her Scarlet Witch regalia, she's reading the Darkhold, studying this dark chaos magic, and trying to understand her true nature. Now we see a mist of red magic floating around Wanda, with particulate matter that kind of resembles stars and mysterious spheres like we saw on the pages of the Darkhold. And to me, this looks almost like a representation of the multiverse, a galaxy of parallel worlds. And as the camera zooms in on Wanda, she hears the cries of Billy and Tommy begging for help, seemingly from some far-off place. Now, if our theory is correct, Wanda is studying how to access the multiverse to find a universe where her kids actually exist, because as she told them in their final moments in Westview, a family is forever and they could never truly leave each other even if they tried. So consider what we know. Wanda is the Scarlet Witch. She is stronger than Doctor Strange and she could bring about the end of the world. But what world will Wanda end? Well, maybe all of them, because by meddling with the multiverse, Wanda could be interfering with forces far beyond her control, and that could in turn lead to multiple universes bleeding in together, collapsing in on one another like we'll probably see play out in Spider-Man No Way Home, followed by Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And if you need more evidence, check out our recent video about chaos magic and Nexus beings for even more comic book proof as for how and why Wanda is crucial to the Marvel Multiverse moving forward. But in the meantime, we'll just have to wait and find out what happens next in Wanda Maximoff's saga, where the White Vision went, and what lies in store in the Multiverse of Madness until Spider-Man No Way Home drops on December 17th. Thank you again to Bondi Spirits for sponsoring today's show. Let me ask you something. Is your collection missing something special, something amazing from Bluefin and Bondi Spirits? Well, if so, we have some great news, because beginning on Friday, March 5th, they're opening the Tamashii Nation's pop-up shop in New York City. Located at 605 5th Avenue, this epic experience features rare and exclusive products from the SH Figure Arts, SH Monster Arts, and Figure Art Zero lines, plus so much more. Plus, if you're as excited as we are to see Godzilla vs. Kong, there are rad Godzilla products for you to buy, as well as a special exhibition of costumes and props from Godzilla vs. Kong as well. To learn more, head to tamashinations.com/popup/NY2021 or read all about it on Nerdist.com. And there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for watching our WandaVision finale breakdown. As always, we'll have even more Marvel coverage for you over on Nerdist.com, as well as breakdowns of all the upcoming Falcon and Bucky show episodes in just a few weeks. In the meantime, though, tell us, what did you think of the WandaVision finale? Did you spot anything that we missed? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.